First, the B-17 that flew without a cockpit. Forgot about my resizing. Let's see if this benefits or is a detriment to us. And this is by FlakAlley, and like I said, it was just random request. I am setting up Tangia for you to be able to request stuff midstream. Technically you can, but I want to have my mods be able to actually moderate the videos and clips that you send that way. So hopefully for Sunday, which, oh, that reminded me. Also for Sunday, I hope to have some of the decentralized stuff done. I didn't get it done quite in time for today, unfortunately. But yes, the B-17 that flew without a cockpit by FlakAlley.
It was the 14th.
That's probably as big as it's gonna get unless we do, right. We can live with this, right? Because of, because I don't want to be resizing this in and out. Volume, make sure the volume's set.
of July, 1944, a thunderous evening, cruising at 25,000 feet, 24-year-old First Lieutenant Ewald Swanson of the 483rd Bomb Group was pilot of a B-17G Flying Fortress, nicknamed Mizpah, its tail number 4232.
I haven't seen this particular story, but I'm going to take a guess right now in terms of what's going on with this. B-17s are famously durable. I think that one is on record of having returned with one engine, half a wing, and no tail. These things are famously indestructible. Well, not indestructible, but what's the word I'm looking for? Because they take the damage. Stubborn, I guess, probably is the word. Mizpah meaning watchtower in Hebrew, for God watching over all man. Oh, cool. So I'm going to guess that they were able to pull like the controls that are back in the main body and run the fly-by-wire through there, but that's just me guessing, because these things were just, they didn't stop.
109. Their mission was to strike at the very heart of the Nazi stronghold in Budapest, Hungary. The formation consisted of 60 flying fortresses, and as they entered Hungary, they were bombarded by relentless curtains of thick flak. Explosions erupted all around Mizpah, shredding the tail section and punching holes into the battle-worn wings. Nonetheless, the B-17 formation presses through the initial flak bombardment and heads inbound towards their main target, the Ferencváros railroad yards. This was one of the most heavily defended and strategically vital targets of the late war, critical for the movement of troops, equipment and oil, keeping the German war machine alive. Now, just seconds away from the target, Bombardier 2nd Lieutenant Kenneth Dudley lines up the Sperry bomb site and
I'm gonna input another thing because it's just a neat little history thing. Formation bombing like this in the day was a very American thing. The Germans would do formation bombing at night because it was significantly harder for defenders to be able to return fire or send aircraft up to shoot them down. And this was done because formation bombing in the day, you tended to, you were a magnet for targets. You couldn't leave the formation, so you get blown to pieces as you were trying to reach the target. So the Germans would hide away and do that at night a lot. The British also would tend to do their bombings at night, but they did not tend to do formation bombing. And instead, they would do sort of a repetitive line bombing where one after another would fly in order to drop, and one would go and drop, the next one would drop at where the first one did, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, that had a tendency to creep and would wander off target. Formation bombing, while the German formation bombing at night also was kind of like, especially since they had much worse bomb sights, was very much, we think the target's here, so we're going to drop the bombs and hope we hit what we're aiming for. Which is why the Battle for Britain mostly just turned into killing civilians, because they could not precisely target at night. Formation bombing in the day, however, was extremely dangerous, but extremely accurate as far as bombing at this time went, and effective. Because you would time when the front bomber would drop its bombs, and when it dropped, everyone dropped at the same time. So you just get a field of bombs hitting the target. It was in the day, so you could see what you were hitting, unless there was a lot of cloud cover. That was a problem. And because you were hitting with a huge area that was basically set up to be the center of the exploding area was the target, and everything around it was also getting destroyed, it was extremely effective. So, very, very dangerous, but extremely effective. And this is why the B-17 Flying Fortress has its name, because it has an absolutely bonkers number of machine guns all over it. Because they can't leave formation. They can't run away. They are stuck flying when it is really easy for the guns on the ground to blow them to pieces and the planes in the air to come swooping in. And when they were over-bombing targets, Mustangs, the escort or other escorting fighter planes, almost never stuck with them, because the fighters were just not as durable, and you were already risking so much with the bombing formation that the fighters would actually leave when the flak started going and they were over the target. German fighters figured this out and started flying through their own flak in order to try to shoot down the bombers when these vastly superior P-51 Mustangs weren't around to protect them. And some Mustang flights, famously thanks to the movies, but also just because they were one of the first to do it, the Red Tails, the Tuskegee Airmen, were one of the first units that would just stick with them through the flak field a lot of the time. And just be like, nope, we are going to defend these bombers and get them home, because they can't do a lot about the Messerschmitts coming and trying to shoot them down. They have a ton of guns, but they're just not that armored, and the guns are just not that big, unfortunately. Bombardier of Japan was asked if he thought he hit the target, and he responded, I'm not sure any of us even hit Tokyo. Oof! Oof, oof, oof. Yeah, there were issues when you weren't doing large formation bombings in the day, unfortunately. Anyways, back to the actual video. I was just trying to add a little of context for what's going on going into this. That these bombers are fairly undefended for bombers, and why they're doing what a lot of people look at and think is a pretty suicidal strategy.
And successfully releasing Lieutenant Kenneth Dudley lines up the Sperry bomb site and successfully releases their bombs. All of a sudden, chaos erupts. A Flak 88 round lands square on the nose of Mizpah. The nose explodes, vaporizing the bombardier and the navigator, whilst covering the front of the fortress in blood. The nose peels off above the aircraft, and shrapnel from the cockpit ricochets throughout the cabin, piercing wing gunner Sergeant Wesley Tucker in the chest. The inside temperature plummets, to a freezing minus 30 degrees. Due to the extreme damage, the center of gravity shifts to the tail, causing the fortress to pitch up into a vertical. They were mere seconds away from stalling out and entering a death spiral. Astonishingly, First Lieutenant Ewald Swanson, despite no longer having a cockpit, regains control.
Is that the actual? That's the actual plane.
B-17 and re-enters the formation.
I think that's the actual plane. Which, for anyone who is wondering why we even have footage of this, an enormous number of B-17s were equipped with gunner cams. These were intended to do a couple things. One, track where the bombs are hitting. Two, track the effectiveness of the gunners themselves. This was to confirm kills, both for personal glory and for tracking enemy resources, and to see what is and isn't working in combat. The bomber command was super duper on top of trying to understand where the problems were and how to fix them. This didn't stop them from having your usual government and military bureaucracy problems, but they were one of the more proactive in trying to actually understand what's going on in the sky and how to fix it, which means we get some absolutely incredible shots of what actually happened in the war live. And I think that we are seeing the actual footage of this bomber right now.
Cockpit regains control of the battered B-17 and re-enters the formation. The crew of a nearby B is away from stalling out and entering a death spiral. Astonishingly, First Lieutenant Ewald Swanson, despite no longer having a cockpit, regains control of the battered B-17 and re-enters the formation. The crew of a nearby B-17, nicknamed Yvonne, couldn't believe what they were seeing. A blood-soaked B-17 without a nose pulls up alongside them.
So wait, oh, holy smokes! Those are the control yokes. The steering wheels that sit right in front of the pilot chair. Those are the control yokes right there. Holy smokes! Dudes! That is wild. That explains how they held gun control. But that is amazing. I cannot stress to you how miraculous that shot is. Both in terms of how horrific the damage is, but how perfectly placed to not completely screw them over it is. That is a wild shot right there.
One of the most haunting sights of the war. Mizpah was strangely flying as if nothing had happened. What was happening inside the B-17 was even more impressive. Since there was no cockpit or control column left to maneuver the aircraft, under the screaming command of Pilot Swanson, the crew had begun to fly the aircraft by pulling the exposed control cables by hand. Despite having lost a significant part of the aircraft, this flying fortress and its injured crew,
I was right about the cables, just not where they were pulling them from,
refused to go down, a symbol of unwavering courage and indomitable machine spirit. However, over 200 Flak 88 guns still had their sights set on the formation. Suddenly, another explosion rattles the B-17. A flak barrage destroys their number 2 engine as the fortress begins to lose power and airspeed. With the nose blown off and an engine gone, Mizpah and her crew, through sheer determination and will, kept the aircraft airborne. However, the effects of drag from all the damage received was increasing by the second. Mizpah had fallen far behind the formation by now. For a perilous 10 minutes, the crew battled the control cables to get as far away from the hornet's nest as possible. Now, over Dunavex, Hungary, pilot Ewald Swanson informed his crew to immediately bail out whilst he held it steady. 7 crew members successfully bail out of the aircraft. Swanson could no longer. 7 crew members successfully.
Eyewitness misses 1 shoot. Oh, right. Okay. So those arrows are tracking Those arrows are tracking not just the chute, but where the chute is floating in the air, I think.
Bail out of the aircraft. Swanson could no longer tame the crippled fortress on his own. Immediately, the B-17 pitches up, trapping Swanson inside the fuselage. He grabs the parachute and keeps it close to him, waiting for the B-17 to stall out. As the fortress comes to a standstill, Swanson takes the opportunity to jump out of the front, but just as he does, his chute catches the torn metal of the cockpit, ripping through the fabric with brutal force. This was a blessing in disguise, however, as if the fabric hadn't torn, he would have gone down with the ship, pinned by centrifugal forces. Swanson is violently flung back, narrowly missing the tail section of the B-17. The young pilot momentarily passes out, whilst falling out the sky from 20,000 feet. When he opened his eyes, he was seconds away from hitting the ground. First Lieutenant Ewald Swanson immediately opens his parachute, but notices that it had sustained significant damage. The chute was not slowing him down enough for a safe landing. The landing was going to be brutal, one that he was unlikely to walk away from or even survive. By sheer luck, on the way down, he spots what he believed to be an enemy POW camp in the middle of a dense forest. Swanson positions himself on top of the trees by the camp, hoping it would break his fall.
I'm pretty sure they had reserves. I know... Well, I'm 99% sure that paratroopers had reserves. They might not have had reserve chutes on emergency parachutes, though.
Several seconds later, he crashes into the dense treetop. First Lieutenant Swanson suffers a broken left leg alongside deep tissue cuts from the tree branches. Against all odds, he survives the landing. The German medics of the POW camp quickly spot Swanson's body in the brush and recover him. They administer life-saving first aid to the young pilot, who has at this point stared death in the face and kept going. In fact, to his amazement, he finds out that the entire crew of his B-17 had survived. His crew were captured nearby, only to meet up at the same camp their pilot had somehow ended up at. A happy accident, as they put it. The crew would endure 9 long months through the harsh cold winter at the POW camp. On the 30th of April 1945, US troops would liberate the crew of Miss...
Yeah, we'll ignore that those are American medics. Or they could be German medics that stole American equipment because they didn't have any.
April 1945, US troops would liberate the crew of Mizpah. The war for these young men had finally come to an end. The 8 survivors would return home to the USA that night. Ewald Swanson's bravery that day would earn him the prestigious rank of Lieutenant Colonel before his retirement from the United States Air Force. After the war, he returned to a quieter life, marrying his beloved Catherine Swanson and raising a son together at Michigan, USA. Yet, it was the bond with his B-17 crewmates that remained closest to his heart. In the decades that followed, they would often reunite, old warriors with weathered hands and bright eyes, sharing stories of impossible missions and the unbreakable brotherhood they forged when they were barely more than kids. Swanson would pass away peacefully on the 28th of February 2009 at the age of 89, remembered not only as a war hero, but as the only known pilot to have ever flown an aircraft without a cockpit. Only Mizpah and the men who dared to ride her into hell and back could ever truly understand what that meant. Only 4 truly understand what that meant.
Whereabouts of the beloved B-17 Mizpah is unknown. Probably crashed and the Germans salvaged it for scrap. Second, remains of her crew are not yet to be found. Second Lieutenant Joseph H. Henderson, navigator, killed in action. Yeah. Second Lieutenant Kenneth W. Dudley, bombardier, also killed in action. Honestly, the fact that the pilot and co-pilot weren't killed by that shot is miraculous. Their sacrifice deserves to be remembered. How many learn of of it depends on you. Honor them by leaving a free like, comment, and subscribe. Keep their story alive forever. Yes, done. This is an incognito window, so I can't do it again here, but done.
Only 4.2% of the viewers watching this video are subscribed. It takes countless weeks to write and produce these videos, but it takes just a second of your time to click that subscribe button. It's completely free, but helps us out immensely in bringing this content to you. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.
Looks like there's a lot of stuff here that we will be checking out in the future. A lot of stuff. I'll save a lot of that for later. That was a really good recommendation. Found a new channel to watch. I'm here for it. I am here for it.